The Apache woman bought the captive rancher. That night she told him, "You will be my husband." The sun had just begun to dip below the jagged horizon of the desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The air was dry and sharp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and earth. A lone rancher worked tirelessly at his small ranch on the outskirts of the vast wilderness. He was a man of simple habits, dedicated to his land and animals, and known by his neighbors for his courage and fairness. His hands, calloused from years of hard labor, moved skillfully as he tended to his cattle, checking fences, feeding the animals, and making sure everything was in order before nightfall. The ranch had been in his family for generations, and he felt a deep connection to it. Every rock, every tree, every stretch of land carried memories of his ancestors. That evening, the rancher had stayed longer than usual, making sure the last few cattle were safely in the pen. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying with it a sense of unease that he could not shake. He shrugged it off at first, thinking it was just the loneliness of the land playing tricks on him. But as darkness crept closer, the shadows seemed to stretch and shift, hiding shapes that should not have been there. He tightened his coat against the cool night air and reached for his lantern, the soft glow illuminating the familiar paths around the ranch. Yet there was a tension in the silence, an unnatural stillness that made him pause. Suddenly, a sound broke through the quiet, the snap of a branch, the soft rustle of movement. The rancher froze, instinctively reaching for the rifle he kept nearby. His heart pounded, adrenaline rushing through his veins. In the fading light, he could make out figures emerging from the desert. They moved swiftly and silently, skilled in the art of surprise. Before he could fully react, strong hands grabbed him from behind, pulling him off his feet. He struggled, but the attackers were too quick, too coordinated. Fear surged through him as he realized the seriousness of the situation. He had heard stories of raids in these parts, but he had never imagined it would happen to him. Bound and unable to fight, he was dragged across the rough terrain, the cold wind biting at his face. The desert night seemed endless, stars twinkling faintly above as if watching in silent judgment. He tried to make sense of it all, asking himself why he had been taken, who these people were, and what they wanted from him. His mind raced, but he also felt a strange clarity. He needed to stay calm, to observe, to survive. Every sound, every movement could hold the key to understanding his captors and finding a way out. Yet despite the fear, there was a part of him that marveled at the desert's vastness, the raw beauty of the land that had nurtured him, even as it now seemed to conspire against him. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes. Time had lost all meaning. Finally, they reached a camp hidden deep within the desert. The rancher's eyes adjusted to the dim light of fire pits scattered around the area. He saw people moving with purpose, their faces partially shadowed by the glow of the flames. He could hear the low murmur of voices speaking in a language he did not understand, rhythmic and commanding, yet not entirely harsh. The camp was alive with activity, yet everything was orderly, controlled. It was a society with rules, traditions, and a sense of honor, even if it was foreign to him. He could not help but notice the care they took with the camp, the way everyone seemed to know their place, their role, and their responsibility. Among them, one figure stood out. She was a woman, tall and strong, with eyes that seemed to see through everything. Her presence was commanding, and yet there was a grace in the way she moved. The rancher's breath caught in his throat as she approached him, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that felt almost otherworldly. She was not like anyone he had ever met. There was a quiet confidence in her, a mix of authority and purpose that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. For a moment, he wondered what thoughts ran through her mind as she looked at him. Was she assessing his strength, his character, or something deeper? He could not tell, and that uncertainty both frightened and intrigued him. The woman spoke, her voice calm but firm, carrying across the firelight. Though he could not understand her words, her tone left no doubt that she was in charge. Other members of the camp deferred to her, acknowledging her authority with subtle gestures and quiet respect. The rancher realized that she was someone of importance, someone whose decisions carried weight and whose actions commanded attention. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere as she circled him, examining him closely, taking in his posture, the way he held himself, the strength in his hands and the steadiness in his gaze. It was as if she was reading his very soul, deciding not only what he was, but what he could become. Fear mixed with curiosity as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The desert had brought him here, into a world so different from his own, where survival depended on understanding and navigating new rules. He thought of his home, his ranch, and the life he had known. Would he ever see it again? Could he ever return? And yet, he could not deny the pull of this new place, the sense that his life was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. There was a strange energy in the camp, a tension that suggested both danger and opportunity, and he realized that how he responded tonight could shape everything that came after. The night grew darker, the firelight casting long shadows that danced across the faces of the gathered people. The rancher's mind raced with questions, but the woman remained a constant presence, her eyes never leaving him. He could feel her studying him, measuring him, and perhaps even considering him for something beyond mere captivity. Despite the uncertainty and fear, there was a strange comfort in her steady gaze. It was as if she saw him not just as a captive, but as someone capable of more than he had ever imagined. That thought stirred a mixture of hope and dread within him, a recognition that his fate was no longer entirely in his own hands, but neither was it completely out of his control. Hours passed as the desert night held its breath. The rancher was placed in a simple shelter, small and bare, yet safe. He could hear the distant sounds of the camp, the low murmur of voices, the occasional laughter, the soft crackle of fire. Each sound reminded him that life continued here, even as his own life had been interrupted. He lay on the simple bedroll, staring at the ceiling, trying to quiet his thoughts, yet sleep would not come. His mind kept returning to the woman, to her gaze, to the weight of her presence. Who was she really? What did she want from him? And why did it feel as though everything in this place revolved around her decisions? As he lay there, a part of him could not help but admire her. There was strength in her, a resilience that he could sense even without understanding her language. She was someone who commanded respect naturally, without shouting or violence, and that kind of power was rare in the world he knew. The rancher realized that he had never encountered someone like her, someone who could change the course of his life so completely with a single glance, a single presence. Fear, respect, and curiosity swirled within him, creating a storm of emotions he had never felt before. And then, just as the desert wind whispered through the camp, she appeared at the entrance of his shelter. Her silhouette was framed by the firelight, and her eyes met his with an intensity that made him shiver. She stepped closer, and for the first time she spoke words he could understand. "You will be my husband." The words struck him like a bolt of lightning, leaving him stunned and speechless. He had been taken from his home, thrust into a world he barely understood, and now he faced a declaration that would forever change his life. Questions and doubts flooded his mind, yet there was no denying the certainty in her voice, the unwavering confidence that left him both fearful and strangely drawn to her. That night the rancher lay awake, staring at the shadows on the wall, wondering how he would survive, how he would respond, and what the future held. The desert around him was silent, yet charged with possibility. And deep inside, he sensed that his life had shifted on an axis from which there would be no return. The woman had claimed him, and the journey he had never imagined was only beginning. The morning after the rancher's capture, the desert seemed unusually quiet. The first rays of sunlight stretched across the sand, casting long, warm shadows over the camp. The rancher had spent the night awake, replaying the woman's words over and over in his mind. "You will be my husband." Every time he whispered them to himself, he felt a strange mix of fear, confusion, and something he could not quite name. How could this be? Who was she to claim such authority over his life? And yet, he could not deny the strange respect he already felt for her, the way her presence filled the space and drew attention from everyone around. By mid-morning, the camp was bustling with activity. People moved with purpose, tending to fires, preparing food, and caring for animals. The rancher watched carefully, trying to understand the rhythm of their lives. Each movement was deliberate, each task performed with skill and efficiency. He noticed the respect they showed toward the woman who had claimed him. When she spoke, people listened immediately, obeying her words without question, even when they involved difficult or dangerous tasks. She was clearly someone of importance, someone who carried the weight of leadership naturally. The rancher realized that she was not just strong physically, but also wise and commanding. Later that day, a ceremony was arranged that the rancher could not yet understand. He was told to stand in the center of the camp while several members gathered around. The woman approached, her eyes focused on him, assessing him once more. The silence was heavy, filled with anticipation and tension. He could feel the curious stares of the others, some filled with admiration, some with skepticism. The woman raised her hand, and the murmurs quieted instantly. She began to speak in a language unfamiliar to him, her voice firm and authoritative. Though he could not understand her words, her tone conveyed her purpose clearly. She was making a declaration, one that would define his place in the camp and in her life. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of simply issuing commands or ordering punishment, she signaled to the others to step back. A small table was brought forward, and a series of exchanges took place that the rancher could only watch in astonishment. He realized that they were buying him, not in a cruel or violent sense, but as part of their customs and traditions. The woman had arranged to take responsibility for him, ensuring that he would be under her protection and care. She had paid a price, one that surprised the other members of the tribe. There was respect in the way they accepted her decision, even some admiration for her courage in asserting herself. The rancher felt a mixture of humiliation and bewilderment. He had been treated as property, yet there was also a strange sense of honor in the act. As the exchange concluded, the woman looked directly at him. Her eyes were steady and unwavering. She had chosen him not out of whim, but with purpose. The rancher could feel the weight of her gaze pressing down on him, challenging him, testing him. He wanted to resist, to speak, to assert himself, but words failed him. He realized that this was not a situation he could fight with force. It was a test of character, of patience, of understanding. And even as he struggled with his pride, a part of him could not deny the intrigue, the fascination, and the cautious respect he felt for her. After the ceremony, the woman took him aside. For the first time, he was alone with her in a quiet space, away from the eyes of the camp. She spoke again, her words deliberate and calm. "You will follow my rules. You will live under my guidance. You will be my husband." The words were firm, leaving no room for argument. The rancher's heart pounded as he tried to process what she meant. Marriage? Husband? He had never imagined himself in such a situation, especially not with someone who had brought him here by force. And yet, there was something in the certainty of her tone that made him pause. She believed in him, had chosen him, and expected him to rise to the challenge. Days passed, and the rancher began to observe the camp more closely. He learned the routines, the traditions, and the rules that governed life there. The people were skilled, disciplined, and resourceful. Every member had a role, and everyone respected one another. He saw how the woman led with wisdom and strength, balancing firmness with fairness. She was not cruel or domineering, but she demanded loyalty and courage. The rancher realized that she had built a community here, one that thrived on mutual respect and shared responsibility. The more he watched, the more he understood why she had chosen him. He had qualities she valued: strength, patience, and the ability to adapt. Despite his growing understanding, the rancher struggled with his pride and sense of independence. He had always been self-reliant, used to living alone on his ranch and making decisions for himself. Here he was subject to another's authority, and that was difficult for him to accept. He had to learn patience, humility, and trust, qualities he had never fully needed before. And yet, even in his struggle, he could not deny that he was learning, growing, and beginning to see the value of guidance and community. One evening, as the sun set and the camp quieted, the woman invited him to sit by the fire. She spoke to him in her language, her voice softening slightly, though still carrying authority. He could not understand her words, but her gestures and expressions conveyed a sense of openness and willingness to teach. She showed him how to prepare food, care for the animals, and understand the land in ways he had never known. She explained the customs, the rules, and the expectations of the tribe. Slowly, the rancher began to realize that she was not just his captor, but a guide, a mentor, and potentially a partner in a way he had never imagined. The nights were long and filled with reflection. The rancher lay awake on his simple bed, thinking about his life before capture, the ranch he had left behind, and the woman who had taken him. He wrestled with his feelings: fear, resentment, curiosity, and a strange spark of admiration. Her confidence, strength, and unwavering purpose were difficult to resist. He began to wonder if perhaps this unexpected turn of events could lead to something meaningful, even if it was beyond anything he had ever envisioned. The woman, for her part, watched him closely. She could sense his struggle, his pride, and his growing respect. She did not force him to comply, but she made her expectations clear. She believed in him, had seen potential in his character, and was willing to guide him toward becoming a partner worthy of both respect and trust. It was a delicate balance, and she handled it with patience, firmness, and insight. She understood that the rancher's pride was strong, but so was his capacity to learn and grow. As the days turned into a week, the rancher began to adapt to his new life. He followed her instructions, learning the ways of the camp and the people. He saw the strength of their traditions, the value of discipline, and the importance of community. Slowly, his fear began to give way to understanding, and his resistance to respect. He started to see the woman not just as someone who had captured him, but as someone who had chosen him, believed in him, and wanted him to become more than he had ever imagined. And then, one quiet evening, as the desert wind whispered through the camp, she approached him again. Her eyes held the same intensity as the first night, but now there was a subtle warmth beneath her authority. She spoke words he could understand this time. "You are mine, not by force, but because I chose you. You will be my husband, and I will guide you." The rancher felt a shiver run through him. He realized that his journey had only just begun. Fear, curiosity, respect, and a strange admiration swirled together inside him, creating a storm of emotions he had never experienced before. That night, as the fire crackled and shadows danced across the desert floor, the rancher understood that his life had changed forever. He had been brought into a world foreign and challenging, but also full of possibility. The woman who had claimed him had not only taken him as her responsibility, but had also offered him a chance to grow, to learn, and perhaps even to love. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He could not go back to the life he had known, not entirely. The desert, the camp, and the woman had marked his life indelibly, and he would never be the same again. Nights in the desert camp were quiet, but alive with whispers of the wind. The rancher had begun to grow accustomed to the routines of this new life, yet every evening brought the same mix of anxiety and curiosity. He could not sleep easily, for his mind was filled with thoughts of the woman who had claimed him. Her words, "You will be my husband," echoed constantly, weaving themselves into his consciousness. At first, he had been angry, confused, and resistant. How could anyone declare ownership over another person? But now, as days passed, he was beginning to see the weight behind her words, the seriousness of her choice, and the care she had taken in bringing him into her world. One evening, as the camp settled into its calm nighttime rhythm, she approached him with the same quiet authority that had defined her from the moment he arrived. He noticed a subtle change in her expression. Her eyes, which had always held intensity, now also reflected a deep thoughtfulness. She gestured for him to follow her to a small clearing just beyond the firelight. The rancher hesitated for a moment, but something in her presence compelled him forward. Each step felt heavy with anticipation, as if he were walking into a new chapter of his life, one that he could neither fully understand nor control. When they reached the clearing, she signaled for him to sit on a fallen log. Around them, the desert stretched endlessly, the stars twinkling like scattered diamonds in the dark sky. The quiet was comforting, yet the tension between them was palpable. She began to speak, her voice calm and measured, explaining in gestures and broken words the expectations she had of him. She told him that being her husband would not mean submission to cruelty, but a partnership built on respect, trust, and courage. Her words were careful, deliberate, each one shaping a vision he could begin to comprehend. The rancher listened closely, his pride warring with his growing curiosity. He had always been independent, used to relying on his own strength and judgment. To have someone define rules and guide him was a challenge to the very core of who he was. Yet, the clarity in her voice, the certainty in her actions, and the care in her attention stirred something within him he had not felt before. There was no force, no threats, only the firm expectation that he rise to meet her vision. The challenge intrigued him even as it unsettled him. He realized that this was more than survival, it was a test of character. As the night deepened, she shared pieces of her world with him. Through gestures, simple words, and demonstrations, she showed him how the camp operated, how each person had a role, and how respect and trust were earned through actions, not words. She showed him how to care for the animals, prepare simple meals, and navigate the land that was at once harsh and beautiful. The rancher absorbed everything, slowly learning to anticipate the rhythms of life in this camp. He discovered that the strength of the community was in the harmony between its members, guided by her leadership. It was a world unlike any he had known, where survival depended on cooperation, understanding, and loyalty. During these lessons, a subtle bond began to form between them. The rancher noticed her care in correcting his mistakes, her patience in explaining again when he did not understand. At the same time, he observed her strength, the way she carried authority effortlessly, earning respect without cruelty, balancing firmness with fairness. He began to feel admiration for her, mixed with the remnants of fear and uncertainty. He recognized that she was not only guiding him, but challenging him to become more than he had ever been before. Every gesture, every word, seemed carefully measured, designed to test him while also offering a path to trust and partnership. One night, as they sat together near the fire, the rancher found himself opening up in ways he had never done before. He spoke of his ranch, the life he had led, and the dreams he had once held. Though she did not fully understand his words, her attention and gestures conveyed deep listening and comprehension. She asked questions through her eyes, her hands, her expressions, encouraging him to continue to share not just facts but feelings. For the first time since his capture, he felt a connection that went beyond fear or obligation. He realized that she was not merely his captor, but a guide, someone who had brought him into a new world with purpose and intention. As the nights continued, the rancher began to reflect on his own character. He realized that his initial resistance was rooted in pride and fear, not understanding. He saw the value of her guidance, the strength of her community, and the opportunity to grow in ways he could not have imagined alone. Slowly, he started to respond to her lessons with respect and effort, showing willingness to learn, adapt, and follow her guidance. In return, she allowed him small freedoms, recognizing his courage and potential, giving him responsibility and trust as a way to measure his readiness for the role she envisioned. The desert nights were long, filled with both quiet reflection and small victories. The rancher learned to care for the animals with more skill, to anticipate the needs of the camp, and to interact respectfully with its members. He began to see the wisdom in her methods, the care in her expectations, and the sincerity behind her claim of him as her husband. Her vision was not about ownership or domination, but about partnership, trust, and shared responsibility. With every passing day, he understood more about her world, her expectations, and most importantly, her belief in him. Yet there were moments of doubt and struggle. The rancher's mind often wandered to his old life, the freedom of his ranch, the familiar comfort of his home, the simplicity of a life lived entirely on his own terms. Those memories clashed with the new reality he was living, creating a storm of emotions, fear, longing, admiration, and confusion. He wrestled with questions about loyalty, identity, and choice. Could he ever fully embrace this new life? Could he accept her authority while maintaining his own sense of self? The questions haunted him, yet he also felt the pull of possibility, the sense that his life could become richer, fuller, and more meaningful if he rose to the challenge. One pivotal night, the woman invited him to accompany her beyond the camp. The stars sparkled overhead as they walked silently, the desert wind brushing past them. They stopped at a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of sand, the moonlight casting silver patterns across the dunes. She gestured for him to look around, to see the land from her perspective. "This is my world," she communicated through gestures. "And now it can be yours too if you choose." The rancher felt a mix of awe and trepidation. The land was harsh and demanding, yet stunningly beautiful. He realized that living here required more than physical strength. It demanded respect, understanding, and partnership. As he looked at her, he noticed the intensity of her gaze soften slightly. For the first time, he felt an invitation rather than a command. She was offering him a choice, to resist, to leave, or to step into this new world with her guidance and trust. The rancher felt the weight of the moment, understanding that his response would define not only his future, but also the future of their unusual bond. The air was thick with anticipation, and he knew that the decision was his alone to make. In that moment, something shifted within him. Fear began to mix with curiosity, resistance with respect. He realized that this woman, who had once seemed so distant and authoritative, had shown him care, patience, and belief in his potential. She had not forced him with cruelty, but had guided him with purpose, testing his character while offering opportunities to grow. Slowly, he began to feel the stirrings of trust, the first faint threads of connection, and the possibility that their partnership could be more than circumstance. It could be choice. The following days were filled with small acts of learning and understanding. The rancher worked diligently, following her instructions, caring for the camp, and observing the subtleties of her leadership. He noticed the way she interacted with others, the respect she inspired, and the quiet authority she carried effortlessly. With each passing day, he felt himself changing, not in submission but in understanding. He realized that strength could be shown not only in independence, but also in the courage to trust, to learn, and to grow alongside someone who believed in him. By the end of the week, the rancher found himself reflecting on the journey so far. He had come from a life of independence and simplicity, only to be thrust into a world of discipline, community, and unexpected guidance. The woman who had claimed him as her husband had not only brought him here, but had shown him a vision of possibility, a life shaped by partnership, respect, and shared responsibility. He understood now that his survival depended not on resistance alone, but on embracing the lessons she offered, the guidance she provided, and the trust she extended. As the sun set on another desert evening, the rancher sat near the fire, watching the woman move among the camp members with quiet authority. He felt a sense of admiration, respect, and the first hints of connection. He had been captured, yes, but he had also been chosen. He realized that his life had changed irrevocably, and for the first time, he began to see the potential for something meaningful, something that could grow from the challenges, lessons, and shared moments of trust. The journey was far from over, but the path ahead was now clearer. And deep inside, he felt the first stirrings of a bond that went beyond fear, beyond duty, and perhaps toward something stronger: trust, respect, and the possibility of love. The desert mornings had a crispness that carried the promise of new beginnings. The rancher had been awake before dawn, as he had every day since his capture, but today was different. The nights of uncertainty, of fear and doubt, were slowly giving way to understanding and acceptance. He had learned the rhythms of the camp, the ways of the people, and the depth of the woman's wisdom and strength. Each lesson, each small challenge had shaped him, teaching patience, courage, and respect in ways he had never imagined. And now he began to see that the life that had once seemed so familiar was only a memory, while the life before him, with all its uncertainty, held real potential for growth and connection. The woman approached him as he tended to the animals, her presence quiet yet commanding. She watched his movements carefully, noting the care he took in handling the livestock, the attentiveness in his actions, and the steady confidence that had begun to replace his initial hesitation. There was a subtle approval in her eyes, a recognition that he was learning, adapting, and proving himself worthy of the trust she had placed in him. For the first time, the rancher realized that their relationship was no longer defined solely by her authority or by circumstance, but by mutual respect and effort. He felt a quiet pride, tempered by humility, as he met her gaze and nodded in acknowledgement of her presence. Over the next days, the rancher became more deeply involved in the life of the camp. He assisted with chores, helped prepare food, and even took part in guiding the younger members in simple tasks. The woman observed him closely, giving him responsibilities that tested his judgment and character. She did not micromanage or criticize unnecessarily. Instead, she allowed him to make choices, to experience the consequences of his actions, and to grow from them. Each success strengthened his confidence, while each mistake became a lesson in humility and understanding. Slowly, he began to feel a sense of belonging, a connection to the people and the land that went beyond mere survival. One afternoon, the woman called him aside to walk with her across the desert. The sun was high, casting sharp shadows across the dunes, yet the journey was peaceful. They moved in silence for a while, the only sounds being the soft crunch of sand beneath their feet and the distant calls of birds. Finally, she stopped at a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of the desert, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. She gestured for him to take in the view, to see the land from her perspective. "This is home," she communicated without words, her eyes conveying a depth of meaning. "And it can be yours too if you walk with me." The rancher felt a wave of awe and humility wash over him. The land was harsh, beautiful, and unforgiving, yet it held life, potential, and the promise of shared purpose. The rancher understood now that being her husband was not a matter of ownership or submission, but of partnership. It was about trust, respect, and the willingness to embrace a life that required courage, understanding, and mutual support. He realized that he had grown stronger not through resistance, but through learning, adapting, and proving himself capable of meeting her expectations. He could see that she had chosen him not arbitrarily, but because she recognized his character, his resilience, and his potential to walk alongside her, not behind her. It was a revelation that brought both humility and pride, fear and hope. Over time, their bond deepened. The rancher began to appreciate the quiet moments they shared, the way she guided him without force, and the wisdom she imparted with patience and clarity. He saw how deeply she cared for her people, how her authority was rooted in responsibility rather than power, and how her decisions were guided by fairness and foresight. He began to feel not only respect, but admiration and trust. And slowly, without realizing it, he felt something stronger, a sense of connection, a recognition that their lives were intertwined in ways that transcended circumstance. Life in the camp was not without challenges. There were moments of tension, misunderstandings, and the occasional clash of personalities. But each challenge became an opportunity for the rancher to demonstrate his growth, to show courage, understanding, and willingness to engage with the world around him. He learned to navigate the complexities of relationships, the nuances of respect, and the responsibilities that came with his new role. The woman guided him patiently, allowing him to find his footing while supporting him in ways that fostered confidence and self-reliance. Through these experiences, he began to see that strength was not just about physical ability or independence, but about the courage to trust, learn, and grow alongside another person. As weeks turned into months, the rancher began to reflect on how far he had come. He thought of the life he had left behind, the solitude of his ranch, and the independence he had once cherished. And yet, he realized that he had never truly lived until now. This life, with its challenges, lessons, and connections, had transformed him. He had become more patient, more observant, and more capable of understanding and respecting others. Most importantly, he had begun to see the value of partnership, the shared strength, mutual support, and deep respect that defined his relationship with the woman who had once claimed him as her husband. One evening, as the camp settled into its quiet routine, the woman approached him again. She spoke softly, her voice carrying the warmth of understanding and the weight of authority. "You have grown," she said, her eyes reflecting both pride and expectation. The rancher nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and respect. He understood now that their journey had been about more than survival. It had been about transformation, growth, and the forging of a bond that could withstand challenges, uncertainty, and the harshness of the desert. He had been captured, yes, but he had also been chosen for a life that demanded courage, trust, and the willingness to embrace change. In the following days, the rancher fully embraced his role as her partner. He worked alongside her, not out of fear or obligation, but out of respect and understanding. He began to anticipate her needs, support her decisions, and contribute to the well-being of the camp in meaningful ways. Their partnership became a balance of strength and understanding, guidance and trust. He no longer saw her as a captor, but as a leader, a guide, and someone with whom he shared a vision for the life they could build together. Each day strengthened the bond between them, solidifying a connection that was rooted in respect, trust, and mutual growth. The woman, for her part, continued to guide him with wisdom and patience. She recognized his progress, encouraged his efforts, and allowed him to take initiative. She did not demand obedience for its own sake, but fostered understanding and partnership. Through her guidance, the rancher learned not only the ways of her people, but also the deeper values of patience, respect, and shared responsibility. He realized that their bond was not based on force, but on choice, effort, and mutual recognition of each other's strengths and potential. The trust between them grew, forming the foundation for a relationship that could endure challenges and uncertainty. As the sun set one evening, painting the desert in hues of gold and purple, the rancher and the woman stood together at the edge of the camp. The wind carried the scent of earth and sagebrush, a reminder of the land that had shaped them both. He looked at her, seeing not just authority and strength, but care, wisdom, and trust. And in that moment, he understood fully what she had meant when she declared him her husband. It was not about ownership or control, but about partnership, respect, and shared purpose. The journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had led to understanding, growth, and a bond that neither time nor circumstance could break. The nights in the desert continued, but now they were filled with quiet moments of connection, shared tasks, and mutual support. The rancher had found his place not by force or submission, but through effort, understanding, and trust. He had been chosen, yes, but he had also chosen to learn, to grow, and to walk alongside her as her partner. Their lives were intertwined, not by circumstance alone, but by respect, courage, and the willingness to embrace a future together. In the vast, quiet desert, amidst the harshness and beauty of the land, they had found a shared path, a bond forged in trust, guidance, and growing affection. The rancher looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of peace and belonging he had never known. The desert, once a place of fear and uncertainty, had become a place of growth, learning, and connection. The woman who had captured him had also given him the chance to become more than he had ever imagined, to embrace a life of partnership, respect, and shared purpose. He realized that his journey had transformed him, not just into a capable partner, but into someone capable of understanding, trust, and care. And as he stood beside her, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as equals in strength, respect, and shared commitment. The days continued, filled with work, learning, and moments of quiet reflection. The rancher had become part of the community, respected not only for his skills and courage, but also for his willingness to grow and embrace the ways of the camp. The woman had shown him patience, guidance, and trust, and he had responded with effort, understanding, and respect. Their partnership had evolved from fear and uncertainty into a bond built on shared responsibility, mutual recognition, and the beginnings of deep connection. And though their journey had begun under unusual circumstances, it had led to a life that was richer, fuller, and more meaningful than he could have ever imagined. In the heart of the desert, under the vast sky and among the people he had come to respect, the rancher finally understood what it meant to be her husband. Not through force, not through ownership, but through choice, trust, and shared purpose. The woman who had once seemed distant and commanding had become a partner, a guide, and a companion in a life that demanded courage, understanding, and mutual respect. And in that understanding, the rancher found not only peace and belonging, but the beginnings of love. A love forged in challenge, growth, and the shared journey through a world that was harsh, beautiful, and full of possibility.